understanding what's happening.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app.
If it's important to our nation,
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
It's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
Three cases form a pattern. The transition out process for presidents and vice presidents is obviously flawed and inadequate.
We're always reviewing those procedures to make sure that they're fully appropriate.
It's the height of hypocrisy for Speaker McCarthy to remove Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell, two members in good standing from their committees, while appointing a complete charlatan and utter fraud like George Santos on a committee.
I think we need to get some new blood in the RNC.
We have a responsibility as a party to fix what is wrong so that we can win elections.
Republicans, especially after the November 8 elections last year, see that he's poison to the ticket.
2024 begins. Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Thank you for joining us. CBS News has learned from a source with knowledge of the investigation that President Biden's personal attorneys did not inform the DOJ before they searched his Wilmington home December 20th, despite an understanding that they would do so before conducting any detailed searches. That, the source said, caught some at the Justice Department, quote, off guard, and was a factor in the decision to conduct an FBI search. Meanwhile, key senators are pushing for access to the documents found in the homes of President Joe Biden, former President Donald Trump, and former Vice President Mike Pence. Members of the Senate Intelligence Committee say that the Biden administration won't give them access to those materials. The senators insisted on seeing the documents after a classified meeting with National Intelligence Director Avril Haines on Wednesday. So for more on this, Robert Costa and Margaret Brennan join us now. Robert is CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent, and Margaret is CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent, and of course, the moderator of Face the Nation. Margaret, I want to start with you and this sit-down that you had with Warner and Rubio. Let's play a little bit of what they told you, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Let's start on the news of the moment. I know the two of you were briefed by the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines. Do you have any timeline in terms of when you will get visibility into the documents, the classified material that both President Biden and President Trump had in their residences?
Margaret, unfortunately, no. And this committee has had a long bipartisan history of doing its job. And our job here is intelligence oversight. The Justice Department has had the Trump documents about 6 months, the Biden documents about 3 months. Our job's not to figure out if somebody mishandled those, but our job is to make sure there's not an intelligence compromise. And while the Director of National Intelligence had been willing to brief us earlier, now that you've got the special counsel, the notion that we're going to be left in limbo and we can't do our job, that just cannot stand. And every member of the committee who spoke yesterday, and I wanted the director to hear this, regardless of party, said, we are united in we have to find a way to do our job. That means we need these documents, we need that assessment.
But the intelligence community would say their hands are tied because this is an ongoing, active Justice Department investigation. So what would meet the level of addressing your concerns without compromising that?
Well, I don't know how congressional oversight on the documents, actually knowing what they are, in any way impedes an investigation. These are probably materials we already have access to. We just don't know which ones they are. And it's not about being nosy. You know, here's the bottom line. If in fact those documents were very sensitive, materials were sensitive, and they pose a counterintelligence or national security threat to the United States, then the intelligence agencies are tasked with the job of coming up with ways to mitigate that.
So first, I do want to point out just how rare it is to see this bipartisanship on Capitol Hill these days, the chair and the vice chair of the Intelligence Committee. But with that said, I mean, they were both kind of saying the same thing here. What do they want to do, or what can they do to try to get a hold of these documents?
Well, this is one of those few committees, Senate Intelligence, where they really try to pride themselves on being bipartisan, and now they've found this common cause on what is a politically toxic issue for both parties right now. But Senator Rubio made clear he's willing to use the leverage he has in terms of holding up some funding, potentially. He said he's not threatening, but reminding the Director of National Intelligence that he does have to greenlight, as part of the committee, some funding for the intelligence agencies. Other Republican senators have said they would stand in the way of Biden administration nominees from getting confirmed. So there is a willingness to play some hardball. And on the Democratic side of the aisle, you do have Senator Warner essentially indicating that he wants to write new laws here. You know, in the past, you did have some Republican congressmen like Brian Fitzpatrick say, hey, when the Mar-a-Lago raid had happened, can we just go down into a secure facility and view the documents? That hasn't happened. In the case of Biden, there has also been no revelation to the committee members about what the contents of these materials dating back to his Senate years contains. So at a minimum, they want to know what's in it, if not view it, perhaps in one of these secure facilities. But Warner's also saying here that when it comes to overclassification, when it comes to the regulations that govern the executive branch in terms of, you know, just record keeping, maybe that deserves a second look by his committee.
That's really interesting, because I think that's a question a lot of us had over the past week was, okay, now that we have this information, what happens next in terms of classifications? But it's interesting to hear those leverage points that they have there. Bob, I want to talk to you, too, because you spoke with John Bolton, who also knows a thing or two about national security. Let's take a listen to what he had to tell you.
The issue of classified records, you've briefed former President Trump, you've briefed many presidents, you've briefed former Vice President Mike Pence, documents found at his Indiana home. Did it surprise you?
Well, it surprises me because in the Pence case, I can't think of anybody less likely to deliberately try to get classified documents out of his office. I think what we've seen, that there's a pattern, three cases form a pattern. The transition out process for presidents and vice presidents is obviously flawed and inadequate. And
where are the gaps in the system?
I think where they occur, at least in these cases, is the packing out of officers who leave the government. And I suspect in the turmoil of the last days, a lot of things just get packed and they don't get checked. So transitioning in is hard enough. Transitioning out is going to have to become harder because there's got to be greater scrutiny of the documents that the people take to their homes or to their private offices once they leave the presidency or the vice presidency.
So, Bob, Bolton picking up there on this question of, OK, what happens next? But it was interesting what he said about Mike Pence. I'm curious what you make of that.
He said that he does not believe Pence had any ill intention with bringing those documents to his home in Indiana. But there are clearly gaps in the system. And there's also a gap, as Margaret's reporting shows, in terms of what Congress knows about what else is out there. And you now see a lot of former officials wondering what's in their personal files. Should they maybe be taking another peek at their records to make sure there's no classified material in there? Calling around former Trump and Clinton and Obama officials today, it's clear that there's a sense that in the move out, everyone thinks they're checking the box, but sometimes the National Archives isn't really alerted to what exactly is leaving the building. And it's going to be interesting to see if there will be a bipartisan consensus in the coming months in coming together to legislate some kind of parameters for this process.
Yeah, it's interesting to see Congress kind of start to sharpen their elbows when it comes to dealing with holding the administration accountable. Margaret, you also spoke to Warner and Rubio about how much Haines knew. Let's play a little bit of that.
Does the director even know what the materials were?
Well, we got a bit of vagueness on that because, again, I believe you want to make sure the intelligence professionals and not political appointees were making some of that. That makes sense to me. But I even think that, if President Trump and President Biden would probably want to have this known if they say there's no there there. Well, there may still be violations on handling, but we got to tell the American people and our colleagues, because we're the only ones who have access to this information, that there's not been an intelligence compromise.
Let me tell you how absurd this is. There isn't a day that goes by that there isn't some media report about what was found where, some sort of characterization of the material in the press. I just saw one this morning again. So somehow the only people who are not allowed to know what was in there are congressional oversight committees.
So what Ruby was saying there doesn't entirely seem unreasonable, right? What else did you learn from them?
Well, that's some frustration with Justice Department leaks, right? And here's the thing, with particularly this Director of National Intelligence, she has really, since she came into office, tried to, and she would say this herself, depoliticize what she viewed as an agency that had the perception of politicization around it, particularly at the end of the Trump administration. And what I heard Senator Warner indicating there was exactly that perhaps there is this, as she is the political appointee, unwillingness to dive into some of this and rather have intelligence officials who are career deal with it. But what he's saying is, don't drag this out. And if the Justice Department is going to conduct this investigation, they also do need to share within the intelligence community what exists. And that wall between the two, so far, we have no reporting to believe has been breached. We don't know if the Director of National Intelligence knows, and he said he couldn't get that answer from her either, which I think is really interesting. Yeah. But there are other issues here of bipartisan concern, and that briefing with the Director of National Intelligence wasn't even supposed to be about this. It was supposed to be about bigger national security issues, and that's where they had wanted this committee to really prioritize their focus straight out of the gate on issues in particular regarding China. And we spent a good part of our conversation about that rising military, financial, economic, and technological threat.
Interesting. TikTok, a big public conversation on Capitol Hill these days. But it's so interesting to see the Senate Intelligence Committee exercising some bipartisanship compared to the House side, which has completely seems to have devolved. You mentioned President Trump, or they mentioned President Trump. Bob, I want to talk to you because former President Trump is actually headed
going downhill,
to South Carolina.
And I think it'll continue to go downhill. I think Republicans, especially after the November 8 elections last year, see that he's poisoned to the ticket. He cannot be elected president. If he were the Republican nominee, he would doom our chances to get a majority in the Senate and the House. I don't think he's going to be the Republican nominee.
Is Trump a threat to national security?
I think he is. I believe that the damage he did during his term was significant but repairable. I strongly opposed him getting a second term because I worried that what he would do in a second term might be irreparable.
All right, so Bob, some pretty harsh words there from Bolton. What did you make of that? And also, did he say anything about his own presidential ambitions at all?
He said he is seriously considering the idea of running for the Republican presidential nomination. It would likely be a very uphill climb for the former ambassador, and I raised that about fundraising in terms of grassroots organization. Bolton noted he is someone who has thought about running for president before. He thought about the idea going back to 2016. And so you see in Bolton this wing of the Republican Party, I would count former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan as part of it, that sees themselves as traditional Republicans, and they would like the possibility of being up on stage with Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential race. But at this point, they're all wondering, is there enough of a coalition there to mount a competitive bid, not just a bid?
Yeah, something to watch in the coming weeks as people start to make those decisions, or at least publicly talk about them. Robert Costa and Margaret Brennan, thank you so much for your reporting and sharing it with us. And this Sunday, be sure to watch Face the Nation when Margaret sits down with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in an exclusive live interview. And speaking of the speaker, the debt ceiling is just the latest high-stakes debate in which he has to navigate within his own Republican Party, a very slim majority there. Up next, the co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus on how moderates could actually help run the negotiating table. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
states from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
Every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
Oh! You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Not one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
People are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether.
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns. Since House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's highly contested speaker vote, there's been a lot of attention paid to those hardliners in his party who demanded concessions before he could wield the gavel. But with such a slim majority, it's not only the Freedom Caucus that has some power here. Every vote counts, including those cast by moderates of both parties. And we could see those dynamics play out in the coming weeks in negotiations over the debt ceiling. So for more on this, CBS congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now from Capitol Hill. Scott, good to see you. So I understand that you actually sat down with two members of the Problem Solvers Caucus, and I'm just so fascinated by this dynamic of moderates having some power here because I think it's just something that's under considered. What did they have to tell you?
Well, any 5 members of the U.S. House Republican Conference have outsized influence because the margins are so slim in the U.S. House, which gives this House Problem Solvers Caucus, this evenly divided caucus of Republicans and Democrats who say they're seeking moderate middle ground, the potential for their own outsized influence, including on what might be the most pressing issue of the year, raising the debt ceiling and preventing financial calamity. We asked the two chairs of the caucus, Ryan Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey, what they think can be done potentially through their caucus. Take a listen. Does it feel like right now you'll need some Democratic votes to pass the debt ceiling?
Anything that gets done, by definition, must be bipartisan. So our point is, why not make it bipartisan now? Start now, working across the aisle. There's going to have to be a lot of give and take. But we all got to surround with two basic beliefs. Number one, we cannot default on our debt. Number two, we can't allow this runaway deficits to devalue our currency.
It's critically important that we talk about the long-term fiscal health of our country. We've got to deal with that, right? So having these conversations together is really important, and that's exactly what we do. And it's amazing how much we've accomplished by working together, listening to one another, and just being reasonable.
This Problem Solvers Caucus takes some credit and gets some credit for some accomplishments last Congress, helping to push past some new gun reform legislation, the effort to help save the semiconductor chips industry in the U.S. Big pieces of legislation last year, but to help get this debt ceiling raised in this uniquely politically toxic moment in Congress may be their high water mark if they are impactful on that, Caitlin.
Yeah, Scott, I wanted to ask a little bit more about that because it seems like an easy path for McCarthy would be just to work with these guys and raise the debt ceiling, right? But he pretty much can't do that because of these factions within his own conference. What is kind of the reality that he's facing here and that moderates are facing here when it comes to the debt ceiling?
I think there's just all those political landmines that surround any House Speaker with this narrow a margin, especially one in which you can only afford to lose 4 votes on anything. Outreach can even be dangerous if perceived the wrong way inside the Republican conference. But the House Problem Solvers Caucus is not just a few people. It's not just a few men and women in the U.S. House. It has this broad bandwidth of dozens of members from different parts of the conference for the Republicans, the caucus for Democrats, from different parts of the country. So we press the 2 congressmen about what else can be done as this Congress continues.
2 years ago, this exact question on gun safety, right? And guess what? People said there's no way you'd ever be able to sit down and work this out. We passed last Congress, signed into law, common sense gun safety legislation. Is there still more to do? Yes, and that's why I'm working on that with Brian and others as well.
One of my responsibilities is to, make sure that within our conference, I start to have as many conversations as I can, ensuring then that we can have the best of both worlds. We can protect the Second Amendment and still protect community safety, protect our kids, protect our schools. They're not mutually exclusive.
Doing outreach to bring some of the newly elected into this Problem Solvers Caucus. It's just one of those times, Caitlin, where all the groups, all the factions, all the coalitions in the U.S. House have some leverage, because when only 5 people can defect and kill some legislation, everybody has some leverage.
That's true, and why not exercise it when you can, I guess, is the thought. Some power that Kevin McCarthy does have is to decide who goes where on committees, and this week he announced that Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell are no longer going to be on the Intelligence Committee. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and kind of where things head from there?
Well, for Adam Schiff, they head towards a U.S. Senate race, announcing his candidacy for the Senate seat in California in 2024. His trajectory is now clear. For Eric Swalwell, he still has seats on other committees in which he can make legislation happen, help push something through. Really, the open question is what becomes of Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. Will she be voted off the House Foreign Affairs Committee? The whole House has to decide on that.
That California Senate race will be one to watch, certainly, with Schiff jumping in. Scott MacFarlane, thank you so much for your time and reporting, as always. And the next leader of the Republican National Committee will be decided this week in California. We'll go there to find out why that matters for 2024 and beyond. That's next. You're streaming Red and Blue.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future.
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. people from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women. What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done? We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Caitlin Huey Burns. Republicans are gathering in Southern California on the heels of last year's disappointing midterm to determine who will head the Republican National Committee. The current chairwoman, Ronna McDaniel, is attempting to fight off Trump attorney Harmeet Dillon and MyPillow CEO, remember him, Mike Lindell. McDaniel's team believes that she has enough votes to be reelected, but some Republicans, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, spoke today to Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk, and he was voicing some support for Dillon.
I think we need a change. I think we need to get some new blood in the RNC. I like what Harmeet Dillon has said about getting the RNC out of D.C.
CBS News political director Finn Gomez is at the RNC's winter meeting in Dana Point, California. Finn, beautiful backdrop right there, making us all a bit jealous. You know, that looking good there. That bite from DeSantis is seems like a pretty big deal. How is that all playing there? Is that going to have an effect?
Well, you know, I spoke to both supporters for both Dillon's insurgent campaign and to Ronna McDaniel, who's considered the favorite here. Of course, she's running for her fourth term. And what those supporters both tell me is they do think it's going to have an impact. Speaking to Dillon supporters, they think that this will have an effect where supporters, where the 168 RNC voting members will fall along this political fault line between DeSantis, who's now asking for new blood, who's asking for a change at the helm of the RNC, and for those who are supportive of McDaniel and also who are supporting Donald Trump, who's of course who's of course the only candidate who's actually running for president right now, with DeSantis considering a run, weighing this run, and could get in as early as the spring. The supporters have told me from both sides that this is having an impact, and you could see this political fault line here at the winter meetings. However, you know, again, McDaniel is considered the favorite here. Her supporters are touting the fact that she has over 100 public endorsements, but of course, there has been, these are usually sleepy affairs, CHP, and the fact that this has become acrimonious, contentious, there's actual real campaigning here, it is a difference.
Yeah, Finn, that's a really good point. And you know, this is a secret ballot, which I feel like could also play into this. How do you think that would benefit one candidate over the other? Do you think it has an effect?
It does. It actually helps. And speaking to RNC voting members, again, there's 168 of them, and the eventual winner needs 85 of those 168 to support them. What that secret ballot does, and the vote's going to be tomorrow, 11 o'clock Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern. And what that secret ballot does, it gives a cover to those who may have publicly endorsed McDaniel, but because of perhaps this not fully full-throated support by DeSantis, but this tacit endorsement by DeSantis for Dillon, it could give a little bit of cover for those who might be on the bubble and might change their vote to support Dillon. Of course, at CHP, there's also a third candidate. I have to cite this. It is Mike Lindell, the MAGA Trump acolyte, who's also, of course, the MyPillow guy, who has espoused a lot of the 2020 conspiracy theories, baseless claims of fraudulent fraud in the 2020 elections. He's also running. He's considered the long shot candidate. But out of those three, it's really a battle between Ronna McDaniel and Harmeet Dillon.
Yeah, and even if McDaniel does pull this off, I mean, there are being questions raised about accountability for Republican leadership given their showing in the midterms. But I do want to look forward to the presidential race in 2024 because that's kind of why all of this matters, who's going to be chairing the RNC heading into that big year. What's the talk like over there in Southern California during this meeting about that next presidential race? Any names coming up?
CHP, that's a great point. And of course, it's not only about the 2024 race that's coming up in this crucial cycle for Republicans, but it's also about the underperformance by Republicans during the midterms in November. And those two cycles are what's really having an impact here in this process of electing the next chair. Now, on the 2024 front, there are no potential presidential contenders here, with the exception of one, Asa Hutchinson, who is the former Arkansas Republican governor. He's here, but there are some representatives from representatives from the Trump campaign and other potential rivals as well here.
Yeah, some names certainly to start getting familiar with. Finn Gomez in Dana Point, California. Bring some sunshine back with you when you come back to D.C. for us, okay? Thanks for joining us. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of this program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/redandblue.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted